The couple, who appeared to be in their late 40s, sat slumped in their chairs in front of the stove in the larger of the 2 rooms of their apartment. They had been dead for days, and the skin of their faces was white with a dull marble sheen like pearl. Both were almost naked, stripped to a grimy vest and slip. The rest of their clothing was strewn around the plain wooden chairs. There were only ashes in the stove, and the cast iron was icy to the touch. The air in the room had already been below freezing when the first policeman on the scene kicked the door open. It had become colder when the window had been hurriedly opened to disperse any toxic fumes that still lingered in the small apartment. Sergeant Kittel stood beside the stove. Despite his buttoned-up greatcoat, gloves and muffler, he was cold, and stamped his boots to keep some warmth in his feet. He was impatient as well, and every few minutes he pulled out a pocket watch and glanced at the hands. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a clock on a narrow shelf beside the stove. The noises from the street were muted by the thick snow on the ground. He could hear the exchanges of the other residents of the apartment block on the stairs and landing outside the front door. With a sigh of steamy breath, he crossed to the opening leading into the narrow hall and passed through the apartment's door with the shattered splinters where the lock had once been. 2 more policemen stood outside the entrance to the apartment, and beyond them Kittel could see a huddle of curious faces on the landing. "Denneker, clear those rubbernecking fools away. There's nothing to see here." He made to turn away and stopped. "No, wait. Keep the concierge back. The rest of them should go home and keep themselves warm." The policeman nodded, but before he could carry out his orders, his superior spoke again. "Any sign of the criminal investigators yet?" "No, sir." Kittel growled irritably. He turned to the other uniformed policeman. "Get down to the entrance and keep an eye out. As soon as the Kripo officer gets here, bring him straight up before we all freeze to death." As Denneker drew his truncheon and waved the small crowd back, his colleague squeezed past the people on the landing and made his way down the 4 flights of stairs to the ground floor. Kittel set his expression in a hard glare as he defied the other tenants to tarry on the landing, and was gratified to see that none dared meet his eye as they turned away and made their way back to their apartments. It was good to see them respond so meekly to authority. The power of the state must be unquestioned if victory in the war was to be assured. Not like the last time, the sergeant reflected. He had served the last 2 years of the Great War before returning to the political chaos that had seized Berlin. Reds rioting on the streets, demanding revolution. Well, the soldiers returning from the front had soon put an end to that nonsense. He had been part of the armed gangs that had taken on the communists and clubbed and gunned them down to restore order to the capital. There would be no stab in the back this time. Besides, the new war was already as good as over. Poland had been crushed, and it was only a matter of time before France and Britain saw the futility of another conflict when the cause of it no longer existed. Poland had disappeared, swallowed up by Germany and her Russian ally. Though if the French and the British did decide to fight on, then victory for the fatherland was far from certain.